afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Lemongrass Live. My name is Ian Graham. I'm a principal consultant in the advisory practice of Lemongrass. Spent the last 25 years of my career championing major IT change and transformation programs across multiple sectors and multiple different geographies. I'm joined today by Andrew and Chris. And together, we'd like to dig a little deeper into the recent SAP announcement regarding the extension of support in certain categories to 2033. ECC, as we know, has been SAP's flagship ERP solution for many years, but its support timeline is gradually coming to an end as SAP refocuses on S/4HANA. That focus is driving a timeline, and an overview of that timeline. The current key dates are that the SAP ECC support timeline, previously standard support for ECC 6 was due to end in 2025. This has now been extended until 2027. The extended maintenance option, which did require additional fees, was available up until 2030. That's now moved to 2033 for those organizations with complex implementation. And after these dates, organizations still running ECC will no longer receive any official updates, security patches, or support from SAP. So let's see if together with my colleagues we can help decipher the outline messaging. Andrew, would you care to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Ian. My name is Andrew Jurek, and I'm the Global Head of Advisory for Lemongrass. Like Ian, I've also spent most of my working life in IT, both with SAP as well as non-SAP projects.
Perfect, thank you. Chris?
Hi everyone, my name's Chris Beard. I work in our solutions team, which lets me work with all of our existing customers as well as many prospective customers, giving me a really wide view on what's going on in the market and customers' reaction to it. And I'm excited to share how customers are feeling about this recent announcement from SAP on the cloud subscription transition option for ECC extending into 2033. A bit of a mouthful, one might say.
That's easy for you to say, Chris. Thanks, Chris. Chris, also, I know you spend a lot of time out there with our customers as well. So this, the first announcement that was made in February and kind of nuanced and updated a little bit in March. It sort of provides a brief overview of that SAP ERP private edition transition option, as they're calling it, could be. How has that messaging landed out there in the field in our customer world?
Yeah, from some customers, there's been an unusually emotional response, just an overwhelming sense of relief. There are some customers who've been really, really worried about this impending deadline for moving to S4. Some customers are seeing this as a way to reduce risk by pushing out the move to S4, feeling that when that's done for more and more customers, it's going to become easier and easier over time. Although I know in the market, there's a general concern about there being enough consultants in the world to move the entire user base from SAP over to S4 in time. I do worry, however, that some customers may be being overly bullish about their chances of being eligible for this extension out to 2033. And I know there are certain nuances in the announcement that are probably important for them to pay attention to. Andrew, maybe you could share a few details around that.
Sure. So yeah, from my perspective, a lot of customers are asking about the recent announcement. And I think there's kind of two ways of looking at it. On one hand, the announcement is really great news for a certain segment of the SAP customer base, but it's not really applicable to the general population. And what I mean by that is that there's some very specific restrictions in terms of what can be done. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at this in a positive light. So if you're moving and are on the path to S4 HANA on Rise, there is a considerable amount of support from SAP to allow you to continue using some of your ECC systems, right? So I would get customers to think of it more as SAP acting as a backstop for the journey, rather than a strategic option to take to just delay taking any action until 2032 or something.
Understood. So listening to what Chris and yourself have just said, Andrew, it sounds like publishing early with less detailed information, albeit with great intent to keep us informed from SAP, the message still might have a slight misinterpretation by some of our customers.
I think that's so true. Lots of customers are really going to want to take advantage of this if they can.
Good. It sounds like there's multiple facets going on in the messaging, and the benefit then is probably going to come from where each customer is, taking into account their current journey, their interpretation of how it's going to be applied, and each customer's individual circumstances. So if I was a customer CIO and I wanted to be selfish about this, how can I ensure that I'm eligible? How can I protect my organization against any future scenario where I end up unsupported? Because this could be a huge risk to a company, and I'm looking for the best way to mitigate against that risk.
Yeah, so it's kind of up to SAP if you're allowed to participate in this or not. And so it's not entirely within the customer's control. And there are so three main things to think about. One is the the offering availability. So although the offer has been soft launched or announced in some fashion, it's really not, you're not able to go and purchase that until 2028. Right? And while there have been some pre-disclosure items about the offer, there's no, pricing has not been released at this point, and neither have the fine details around the terms and conditions of this. Those also have not been published, and the expected date when those will be released is again on the 1st of January 2028, so a little ways ahead. Second to think about is the offering validity. So the offer is only valid from January 1st, 2031 into the end of 2033. And so even if you were going to say, okay, we're going to go and delay the move, SAP would still get you to use the regular mechanisms which end in 2030. Okay? The last thing is around the eligibility. So there's a few hints in some of the press releases and statements that have been made at conferences, et cetera. Right? So first of all, this is applicable to what SAP calls very large customers with very complex SAP estates. So maybe in the hundreds of SIDs, multiple ECC landscapes, et cetera. The other thing is that they will have had to have started on the RISE journey, okay? And that journey must include S4. So those are kind of some of the big hints. It's a little bit like, SAP is allowing the pub to stay open or serving drinks in the pub, but you have to be inside the pub before 11 p.m. to continue ordering those drinks. So you would have had to make some significant steps already and kind of forewarned or spoken to SAP about your plans in order to participate. I think that would be your best strategy if this is something that would be of interest, right?
Sure.
So the other things to note, right? So this is really centered around ECC. It does not include the full scope of Business Suite 7. So it's, that part is only available for a subscription until the end of 2030, at least according to what SAP is publishing at the moment. And for the SAP ERP Private Edition transition option, you need to be on the correct version of SAP ERP prior to the end of 2030. So we'll get onto some of those criteria in a second. And at the moment, SAP HANA is the only supported database. So, while it may be possible to go and move ECC to RISE on other databases at the moment, that won't get you all the way. So SAP really does want you to be on HANA. And lastly, the ERP needs to be on Enhancement Pack 7 or above. So you can't just turn up with any version of ECC that you like. Okay? So in terms of the detail, which is kind of slightly lacking, they haven't really gone into much detail around what type of additional support is going to be included in 2031, 32, 33. The devil's often in the details with some of these things, and with past experience, some of those things were more just maintenance options as opposed to incorporating maybe changes in tax codes or other business-related change. Right? So this really is designed to keep these systems fed and watered, but not necessarily up to the latest, functionality specs. So what do we need to do with this, right? So if you're a mid-market player, so you're not a Fortune 100 company with hundreds of SIDs, you're unlikely to fall into the eligibility criteria, right? Now that doesn't mean the world is ending. You can still be on, making sure that you're doing all the right things, that no regret decisions. So making sure you're on the correct version of ECC to at least go and extend you to the end of 2030. And if you're on that journey, I think it would be worth having a conversation with SAP about maybe some other business challenges that are preventing you from moving that last ECC system. That might be a much more palatable thing rather than just starting the journey in 2027.
So if I understood this correct, Andrew, customers aren't going to know until 2028, until that 11 p.m., 11th hour point, whether or not they'd be eligible. There's to know before the 1st of January 2028. And so if your strategy is you're going to wait in the hopes that you're ready for 2033, you might find out 1st of January 2028 actually you don't have that timeline. You've got to be done by 2030. That seems like a really high risk strategy to be taking with the core ERP platform. Did I understand it right?
Correct, and that's the reason why this announcement is positive for some customers. And SAP is extending that olive branch. That doesn't mean it's applicable to all of those customers.
So that makes sense. So if you're moving to S4, if you're going to RISE, if you're doing all the right things that SAP tells you need to do, and you run into some trouble, this is like a safety net for you that may be available to you if you run into those problems. It's not a strategy to follow. Is that our view on this?
Correct.
Okay. And then, of course, we haven't talked about the positives, right? We're talking about how long can you delay, but there are enormous benefits to moving to RISE, moving to S4, and taking advantage of all that massive R&D spend that SAP are making every year. I think it was $2 billion of R&D spend annually, pretty amazing amounts of money. And they're pumping the majority of that into their public cloud offering, for which you need to get to clean core. Of course, S4 and RISE are steps towards that as part of that RISE journey, and their BTP platform, where ostensibly you could start today in parallel with your journey to adopt BTP for things like WorkZone for code development, starting to move towards Integration Suite and DataSphere for replacements of PIPO and BW. So that there are things you could be doing on that journey that you should start now to take advantage of the innovation from SAP, as well as thinking about when your support contracts end. And of course, the more you do now, the less weight it is to move as you get closer to that deadline, the less risk you're taking on as an organization.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this isn't for all customers, right, Andrew? There are some customers I've got who are already on S4, who have perpetual licenses. They're quite happy. They're thinking about RISE, but it's not urgent right now. This isn't for them, or is it?
So for certain customers, this would not be applicable. However, some of the early adopters of S4, there are still timeouts in 2030, which will begin to affect customers that have moved to S4 but then not kept up to date with the regular upgrades that need to happen, right? So companies still need to be making sure that they're performing those regular updates. The Other area where we've noticed companies that had remained in a cloud native or on-prem solution are compatibility packs, right? So compatibility packs were released in order for you to extend the life of some of the products. Even though you moved to S4, you may have still had a previous version of an ECC product. And those compatibility packs, those are timing out, and some of them are actually timing out in 2025, right? So there is several areas where you could still be affected by this, even if you are on S4.
Okay, so even if you're on S4, you may want to think about moving to RISE to get some help from SAP with keeping on the upgrade cycle, and also looking at SAP's Business Suite for the other line of business applications where a compatibility pack may have served you in the past.
Great.
Great. So it still sounds like there is interpretation, application of how you believe it affects you. So we probably still need some further clarification to come, which sounds like it's on its way. But I guess from a preemptive point of view, the announcement has reminded us that there'll always be a finite lifespan for any software product out there in the market, and support will cease at some point in the future. SAP have made it clear as to where those dates kind of roughly sit, without providing too much further detail around it at this point in time, but giving us an early warning. And to consider beginning that journey now and put the pre-planning in place will certainly help to mitigate any or some corporate risk that may manifest as part of this. I mean, the wider angle on this is we know that the move from ECC to S4HANA is not a simple upgrade, but it's quite a large transformation project, which will require technical database migrations, code remediations for any custom developments, business process redesign, data cleansing and simplification, and the big one for me is the user training element and the change management aspect that goes with any transformation program. So many organizations are planning multi-year migration projects to complete the transition before these support deadlines. And if we were or weren't doing that, what other things should customers be considering? What can they take from this? What's the right course of action as we understand it today?
So first and foremost, I think in order to continue a good working partnership with SAP, customers kind of need to demonstrate a commitment to RISE and S4. Right? That's SAP's strategic direction. Realistically, there's a few different steps or options that customers have. If a customer is running on ECC and that version is not supported after December 2025, there are a few things that they can do. First of all is you could move to RISE with S4HANA Private Cloud Edition by December 2025. And therefore you wouldn't need to wait for the SAP ERP Private Edition transition option at all, because you would now be on a supported version on RISE. Alternatively, if you don't want to make that move, or that's simply not possible by the end of 2025, the recommendation would be to upgrade at the very least to Enhancement Pack 7, 8 is even better, by the end of 2025. And then you could kind of choose to see whether the details around that private edition transition option, what all those details are, and then take a decision about what to do next, right? If you are a customer that's on an ECC version that's supported until December 2027, then you have sort of two further options. One is that you could go and move again to the SAP S4HANA Private Cloud Edition by December 2027, and that would put you in the correct place that SAP sort of wants you to be in. Alternatively, you could delay that and pay 2% per year for extended maintenance until the end of 2030. Lastly, you could use that as a backstop until 2030, and then see whether you're eligible for the transition option, or simply move to S/4HANA before the end of 2030.
Excellent. So it sounds like we have the kind of the straw man or the outline of a timeline planned out for us by SAP making this announcement. But in reality, the start early option seems to be the least risky option, even if it's just starting early to think about how you might run that plan through from now until 2033, taking into consideration all the options that you have in front of you. I'd certainly recommend that customers get specialist advice on what the best path forward is. And there's quite a few nuances for each customer, so having those priorities thrashed out, finding out where your starting point is, where you're trying to get to, are all going to be individual for each customer we talk to. So using the expertise of a specialist consultancy, the likes of Lemongrass, who work with clients across multiple sectors, multiple geographies, it gives a great perspective on what works and what doesn't. We have access to major programs that we've worked on, we've learned along the way, we know what is good, what good looks like. So I'll help you plot the most effective course through to achieving your objectives. You know, this is kind of our day job. We do these kind of migrations every day of the week. Most organizations, as we've seen by the announcement, tend to backstop them and wait until the last moment, until it becomes absolutely necessary. So we don't have all the answers. We do have a lot of them. We can tell you what the things that work are, what the things that don't work are. There is a QR code at the end of this presentation that you can click on to talk to us about this. We're happy to talk to any customer about where their journey's starting. And to kind of look into that a little deeper, the typical questions we get asked, we've got a list of those. Andrew, do you have a typical question that customers ask us?
Sure. One of the questions or points of view, I guess, that the customers have is that they simply don't have the budget this year to start an upgrade program and move to S4 on RISE. And so they're typically looking at what practical steps can they take now in order to make that upgrade easier in the future.
Okay, I can take that, Chris, if you're all right. Yeah, so bringing in a specialist organisation like ourselves, again, we can help you understand or look at the holistic case for moving forward through the upgrade options. We can help you transform that to see where value might be delivered rather than just incurring the cost of a typical IT upgrade program. Your board may see that as a cost just to stay static. We can help you transform that into seeing where you can utilise that progression to start delivering value back into the organisation, making use of additional functionalities, maybe once moved to cloud, to start looking at industry verticals within the hyperscalers with solutions that you have access to from that point. So there's a lot of specialist company can do to help you frame that cost into a value statement up to your board.
I think there's other things as well that we can add on that from the technical point of view. So even while you're considering your S4 or your RISE journey, some of the things you can get started with today around the BTP layer, don't depend on those. They're obviously enhanced by them, but you could start them today. So when you're building new developments in BTP, they're no regret developments. You're not building something you're only going to have to convert to get into S4 or for your next upgrade the year after. By following the ABAP cloud coding standards and developing a microarchitecture in BTP today with all your new developments, by building your new integration suite, you're really following a no regrets implementation approach, which reduces your costs going forward. So that there are technical things that are tactical that can be done in addition to looking at the wider strategic direction.
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. I've just got one pop up on my screen here. My company has upcoming major M&A activity. Would a move to S4 be of any assistance to this?
Sure, I can take that one. Yeah, I've worked with several companies that having the ability to go and package up parts of the business and be able to exit those parts of the business quickly, or indeed to be able to integrate companies that they've purchased easier. And S4 does help in some of those respects. Typically, it involves some changes to company codes, but the way in which the new ledger is laid out, is beneficial in that space. So I don't know whether I would move to S4 just for that one benefit, but it is something that companies do appreciate.
Hey, I was talking to a customer the other day, and they had a question around this. They plowed an awful lot of money into building a world-class data center. They don't really want to move to one of the hyperscalers after that investment, which they own and they're very proud of, and they feel is more secure in many ways than the cloud. Is there a way they can take advantage of RISE and an S4 shape without giving up this control and safety that they see and giving up that investment?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So yes, we recently worked with a company in the US, and there is an option. It's not widely published by SAP, but it's called the Customer Data Center Edition, or CDC for short. And this is where hardware gets dropped off at a customer location. So it's within the physical premises of the company typically, or a provider, but it is not traditional cloud as you know it. And what that allows is for some companies really like this due to data sovereignty rules. Some companies like it because they're able to go and write off that asset from a financial perspective. And some of them, they've just invested lots and lots of money into data centers, and that's what they view that their data centers as a strategic asset, and they would like to keep the information there. So there is an option if you don't want to necessarily go full on cloud, but you still get all of the benefits of RISE. You still get access to all the AI tools and all of the BTP stuff as well.
That's great. I think my customer will be excited to hear that.
Fantastic. Thank you. We could go on for hours, I'm sure, but in the interest of time, and thanking everybody for taking the time to watch this conversation, we appreciate that. And if anybody would like a conversation with any of the three of us or anybody else in our organisation to discuss your requirements going forward, please feel absolutely free to reach out. But until then, I'd like to say thank you to Andrew, thank you to Chris, for helping with this conversation today, and take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.